and then I'll give a quick introduction to who I am and why I'm here. And then I'll go ahead and introduce Andrew Dahlgreen, as well as the other three panelists that are going to join us in this discussion. So just a little bit of background on me. Again, my name is Phil Waller. I've spent the last 13 years working in community economic development with a special focus on entrepreneurship. So I've worked with entrepreneurs in all sorts of contexts and geographies, between rural entrepreneurs in the Dominican Republic, small merchants in Haiti, as well as advanced manufacturing and mainstream entrepreneurs across the eastern US and in the Midwest. And I got involved in this work in Industry 4.0 and advanced manufacturing while I was living in Philly, and this was between 2016 and 2018. I first met Andrew Dahlgreen. I was doing work supported by the Delaware Valley Industrial Resource Commission, as well as the city of Philadelphia, to understand the different trends that make up Industry 4.0 and what government can do and what different support organizations can do to help all the different stakeholders, whether that be entrepreneurs, legacy manufacturers, innovators, workforce development, try to understand how all these different constituents can work together to help usher in Industry 4.0 and for the region of Philadelphia, and in a way that is equitable and inclusive for all Philadelphians. So just a really quick history lesson to explain what we mean by Industry 4.0. It's shorthand for the fourth industrial revolution. So the first industrial revolution, this was marked by transitioning from hand production to machines and using steam power. That was the mid 1800s. Turn of the century, coming into the 20th century, we saw the second industrial revolution, where we saw industries like coal and iron grow. We saw the expansion of railroads and the use of electricity. And then in the late 1900s, so the 70s through the 90s, with digitalization and automation, this is when we saw huge gains in manufacturing productivity, because now we have machines with minds almost that are creating so many of our products, but we also see a lot of job displacement as well for manufacturing workers. And now, for some would say the last 15 or 20 years, we have been either on the verge of or in the middle of what people are calling Industry 4.0. So this is where the internet and artificial intelligence and big data is sort of converging with manufacturing, because we have so many products, physical products, that now have smart technology or connected devices that are embedded in them. And we're at a place today where there's more of these smart products on the planet than there are people. So Industry 4.0 is really a high level discussion of what are all these technological trends that are transpiring, how do they impact the economy, and how do they impact all the different stakeholders that are participating in that. So again, that through researching that work in Philly on a 2-year project where I partnered with Andrew Dahlgreen, we talked to over 200 different stakeholders from government, workforce institutions, universities, as well as innovators, maker spaces, entrepreneurs. And it was through that outreach effort that I got connected with the Business Center and the Eastern Minority Supplier Diversity Council, who were also trying to understand these trends, but specifically through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So as you might have read in the byline, there's lots of challenges that come with technological advancements, and often those challenges are exacerbating existing structural inequities along gender lines, around racial lines, and the disruption to society that's happening because of Industry 4.0 is so grand, it's so great, that the opportunity to create equity is greater than ever before. That's my opinion. I think that's an opinion that's shared by many of the folks who work in this space. But also the threat that we have increased inequality because of some of these structural barriers is also greater than ever before. So we're sort of at this this moment where we have to figure out how can we design Industry 4.0 to work for all Philadelphians. So that's sort of the tee up for the conversation. I'm going to go ahead and let the 4 panelists that are going to be joining our discussion introduce themselves, and we'll start with Pam from the Business Center. And I'm just going to ask for each of the panelists to tell us a little bit about yourself personally, the organization that you represent, and why you've joined this panel today. And then after we talk to the panelists, we'll have a discussion with those folks to frame, again, specifically what are some of these issues that we're seeing related to Industry 4.0. And then all of that's going to be really great context for us to share with you an ambitious vision that the Business Center and EMSDC have to create an innovation in manufacturing space in Philadelphia, specifically for women and people of color, but a center that would serve all Philadelphians and helping folks take advantage of the moment that we're in. And then after we share that vision, we'll have time for question and answers and a general discussion. So yeah, let's just hop right into the panelist introductions. Like I said, we'll start with Pam. Tell us about yourself, Pam. Who are you? Why are you here?
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Phil, and welcome everyone. As I said earlier, I'm the executive director of the Business Center. And the Business Center up to this point has worked primarily with startup companies. And in Philadelphia, there's a very saturated market of technical assistance providers that work with startup companies. So as we do our research as a technical assistance provider, our concern was staying relevant in the work that we do, and also servicing individuals that would also be relevant moving forward with the trends that we see in our society. So for us, the critical reason that we joined as a partner on this particular project was to make sure that small businesses, and in particular, businesses that consisted of women and people of color, would be a part of whatever was coming down the pipeline in the areas of bioscience, technology, and advanced manufacturing. And then once they're part of it, to make sure that they had a seat at the table, which often comes with having an advocate, someone that can support them in their efforts as they build their relationships and go after contract opportunities.
Thank you, Pam. Next, we'll hear from Valerie Cofield, the President and CEO of the Eastern Minority Supplier Diversity Council, followed by Layla Aislake.
Good afternoon, everyone. Valerie Cofield, President and CEO of EMSDC. As Phil has said, my background has been in, it's been across a host of industries, but primarily in economic development, advocacy, business development, specifically in the private industry. For those who don't know, EMSDC, the Eastern Minority Supplier Development Council, is a part of the National Minority Supplier Development Council. We are a 50-year-old organization with local, regional, national, and global reach. And our primary area of responsibility and service is in connecting and developing businesses to get them integrated into the supply chains of corporate America and buying institutions. And when I say businesses, I mean specifically ethnic minority owned businesses. Um, our focus in getting involved and partnering with the Business Center around the Innovation and Manufacturing Center was really because we see a need in the marketplace to integrate more diverse businesses into the supply chain at the maker level. And that is that they're a part of the production inside of the economies um, of pharmaceutical, bioscience, even bringing products to shelf in the retail industry. And so it's been really important that we identify those businesses that we can help scale so that they can increase their partnerships in the private industry. I think our differentiator is that unlike most organizations in the Philadelphia marketplace, we are not just focused in on startups. In fact, our sweet spot are not startups, but more importantly, mature businesses that are looking to grow into new business areas and opportunities. And so this manufacturing center partnership with the business center gives us an opportunity to introduce the businesses we work with to opportunities inside of these supply chains, but also our corporate partners to identify potential R&D partnerships and product partnerships. And so that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. So next we'll hear from Layla Sykes. She's a Senior Manager of Human Systems Engineering at Lockheed Martin. And then Andrew Dahlgreen will close us out.
Hi, everyone. My name is Layla Sykes. Thank you for having me here. I have been working at Lockheed Martin. As Phil said, I am a senior manager at Lockheed Martin for the last 20 years in Morristown, New Jersey. For those who aren't familiar with Lockheed Martin, we are an aerospace defense company where we support a number of our projects in defense and arms, security, advanced technologies, and more. One of the reasons why I'm here is to support the supply chain management for our small business suppliers and diversity program. So at Lockheed Martin, we do have a division that focuses on bringing in small businesses. So the supply management small business supplier diversity program is designed to support the objectives and goals of Lockheed Martin's aeronautic company and provide a maximum opportunities for small businesses that concentrate on certain areas that we're looking for in the procurement system. So the small businesses include a small disadvantaged business, women-owned small businesses, historically Black colleges and universities, and minority institutions. And the vision that we set for our supply chain management small business and diversity program is to create an environment that is receptive to the challenging ideas and to respond to diversity and voices for the responsibility of the company. So I'm here to support this panel and really provide an insight as to how challenging it can be for women and minorities to break into the defense industry as a whole.
Thank you, Layla. And then last but not least, Andrew Dahlgreen.
Hi, thanks, Phil. Hi, everybody. So my background, a little bit of what Phil kind of mentioned, I actually have a background in design, product design, making, manufacturing, and entrepreneurship. And for the past sort of decade, I've been teaching at several different universities and getting more and more inspired by working with people outside of an academic setting. And so roughly 4 years ago, started working with DVRC, which is part of the Pennsylvania Industrial Resource Center Network, looking at how do we build industrial ecosystems, how do we build relationships between manufacturers and entrepreneurs to make that ecosystem more resilient, more robust. And then also more recently started working with Urban Manufacturing Alliance, which is a national network of practitioners and organizations across the country leading the development of urban small batch manufacturing ecosystems. And they're taking a kind of national lead in the conversation around inclusivity and Industry 4.0. And I was very motivated and excited about this project here in Philadelphia because in a way, it's really exciting that the Business Center and EMSDC are taking these kind of large conversations, but putting them into action and trying to actually build new supports, new ecosystems, and new programs to help women and people of color entrepreneurs. And so it's been about a year. No, I've been involved in the project since March. I think, Pam, you can fill in a little bit longer sort of narrative, but the project's been underway for quite a while, and I think we're getting some momentum, and it's exciting to start to share this with the public at a larger scale.
Thanks, Andrew. So as you all can see, we have a really diversity of perspective here on our panel. For those of you familiar with manufacturing, and you understand that it takes an entire supply chain of a lot of different actors to produce things, right? But there's also a whole ecosystem of other actors that are supporting that supply chain and developing that supply chain. So I'm really excited that on one end of that spectrum, we have Leela's voice, who can represent a large corporation, a large manufacturer who's producing for huge clients like the Navy, but who rely on nimble and agile small businesses for their innovation, their ability to supply goods on a rapid basis. On the other end of that spectrum, Andrew Dahlgreen, his experience as a designer, product designer, and innovator himself, but also supporting other innovators in the ecosystem, whether as a professor or a professional. And then we've got Valerie and Pam, who are representing sort of those organizations that are in between, that want to be a conduit between these two important pieces to support them and uphold them. So I have a set of questions prepared that I wanted to ask each of the panelists to address here. But we have a relatively intimate group here on the call. And so while we do have time remaining at the end for questions and answers, if you got a burning question that you want us to get to right now, we have time for that. So you can go ahead and just type that right into the chat box, and we'll either address it during the conversation or we'll come back to it at the end. But the first question that I have, and this is for anyone who's brave enough to jump in here first. I'm wondering, the organization that you represent, or the stakeholders that you represent, what are the sort of exciting or scary trends that you're seeing in Industry 4.0? But more importantly, what is your organization or the folks that you're supporting? What are they doing to sort of prepare for? I shouldn't even say prepare because we're in it, but what are folks doing to adapt to some of these trends?
So Phil, this is Valerie. I'll take a stab at this one first. I'm really proud of, or exactly, continue to be completely amazed at the nimbleness of the businesses that we are working with. They've truly taken this opportunity to pivot their businesses, looking at their core competencies and finding adjacent business opportunities where they can pivot into other spaces. We have a company in Allentown, not Philadelphia based, but in Allentown, that was able to convert their distillery operation to manufacturing hand sanitizer. And so that allowed them to respond to the immediate needs of the pandemic. It's a minority Black-owned business that has been able to leverage their facility, convert their operations, and expand and get new contracts with large corporations. But we've also seen a number of our businesses be able to do very, very similar things in getting into the PPE business of supplying PPE, of high-level sanitizing and janitorial services. We've seen a number of our tech businesses go into the technology space and being able to, in the technology space, being able to focus on cybersecurity, um, Internet of Things and doing the connectivity piece, being able to go in and do security assessments for corporations in terms of their supply chain, um, analyzing supply chain efficiencies in response to a lot of the slowdown that we're seeing. And so what I've seen is our businesses have been nimble and able to respond probably at a much faster and higher level than larger companies because of um, the lack of internal bureaucracy inside of their organizations and really in survival mode. Another thing, and I think I shared this earlier, is we're seeing a move to reshoring, where a number of businesses, a number of corporations are bringing operations back onto American shores. And so we've been working with partners in both um, large industry and with our minority business community and identifying onshoring opportunities that are both in the manufacturing and or service space to support, again, continuity of business for our minority-owned business community.
Valerie, you mentioned that small businesses are able to respond and adapt more quickly, and you also talked about how, especially with this pandemic, there's a lot of conversation about reshoring manufacturing, having more local supply chains as opposed to global ones. Can you speak to some of the things that EMSDC is doing to help these small suppliers make these adaptations? And then I might follow up with Leela to speak more to, for these large corporations, how exactly do you benefit from connecting with small suppliers?
So the biggest thing that we've been able to do is identify the opportunities. Is number one, to match, to identify the businesses that are making these pivots in terms of their service products or solutions with our corporate partners. But the other piece that we've also been doing is access to capital. Because of course, when you make these types of transitions, um, capital fluidity is really important. And so being able to match our business owners with the capital has been critical to ensuring their success. Um, but really, it's been our businesses that have come to us and said, look, we see an opportunity in the marketplace, and what we need are the channels of the supply chain so that we can be successful. And we've done that by matching.
Thank you, Val. So yeah, Leela, could you spell out for us a little bit more why supporting this ecosystem of small manufacturers of these innovative small businesses, why is that core to the success of Lockheed Martin? And
Sure. Well, for a number of things, Phil, and thank you, Valerie, for sharing that. You actually brought up a point that's very true. Being the corporate size that we are at Lockheed Martin, we are not very nimble. We're a big giant, so we turn very slowly. But there's a process in place that's repeatable to support minorities and women in innovation in this particular venue. In fact, we have a SBIRS, which is called Small Business Initiative Resources, that the company across all the corporations, so Lockheed Martin is divided into 5 different entities: Rotary Mission Systems, RMS, our Space, Missile Fire Control, EO, and then our Aero. So each of these divisions, how we incorporate small businesses based upon a qualification that has to be met. Most of our contracts are of a level of clearance that requires the manufacturer to be able to produce and receive data at that level. It's also incorporated as a part of our business, the way that we do our practice. In order for us to stay viable and receive continuous government contracts, Lockheed Martin must partner with small businesses and minorities to make sure that we are building the economy also and providing, and not just kind of being a one source provider. So in that, we make sure that we are maintaining our quality and our focus, what our visibility is, and we are looking to take from the Industry 4.0, how we are involved in that is making a digital transformation. So I know we're talking more about manufacturing and how that comes into play and can be used in small small businesses as well as in sharing with large corporations. Making a digital transformation is basically taking that hardware, that tangible widget that is produced, and digitally transferring that into some area of software that can be used across the corporation, or a process that can be used across the corporation, to kind of remove the for lack of a better word, the brick and mortar of things, and make things a little bit more viable and transferable for that skill. So in that, we focus on developing what the supplier needs, as well as how we can support the supplier in our overall manufacturing process. And that comes in different areas. For the division that I'm working in, for RMS, particularly for the Navy, we focus on manufacturing radars and what goes along with that. And because that manufacturing of radars, there's various parts or constructions that we need in order to build the radar, and we make it a point to partner with those businesses to bring in that visibility into our overall corporation.
Thank you. So Lee in the chat, he asks, can you talk about the role of capital access to ensuring equitable participation in Industry 4.0? So I think where we are in the discussion is a good place to try to weave that in. And I might call on, for me, there's sort of two perspectives. What are the special capital requirements that makers or small business in the manufacturing industry have, and Valerie, I know you've spoken about this before, about how so many businesses that are coming in are not capitalized. What does that mean? And Leela, when you were telling me last week about your the SBIRS program, remind me what the acronym is that's for again. The Small Business
Initiative Resource Program.
Thank you. It might be really good to hear some more about specifically when small businesses or early stage suppliers are coming to you and looking to do work with you. Again, what are some of the shortcomings they have? And I think that links back to this question of capitalization. And then a good thought maybe for Pam or for Andrew. Pam, since you support a lot of entrepreneurs of color and a lot of women entrepreneurs, I'd love to hear, from that, demographic perspective, what are the special capital challenges that women and minorities face? And then Andrew, you might be able to tell us a little bit more about why capital is so crucial and the timing of capital in the product development and innovation process. So I just said a whole bunch of stuff, and I just assigned everybody some talking points. But why don't we kick this off with Leela telling us a little bit more about the SBIRS program and where she sees businesses struggling when they come to you. And then Valerie, if you have some points, I imagine you might have some points to add to what Leela's saying, so feel free.
I think one of the things, thank you, Phil, one of the things that I've seen, and I'll just say that, what my work is specifically is that I focus on the display systems for Navy cruisers, destroyers, and aircraft carriers. So what the sailor sees and sits in front of, the buttons that they touch, that's a display system. We interface with the back end of the capability that goes along with that. When it pertains to manufacturing and SBIRS, one of the things that I've seen that can be a blocker for minorities and women of color could possibly be that the historical standpoint of the company has not been fully established. So when I say the historical standpoint of the company is making sure that you have a repeatable process that can be audited by the government, because we have certain contractual obligations that we have to meet in order to provide any type of service to our customer. And that service is governed by certain mill standards and certain qualifications that have to be met in order for this particular small small business or to be incorporated in any of the work we're doing. So one of the things that I think that maybe could be a blocker is that the industry has not, for small businesses, has not yet established the status quo that this is where you need to be in order to be a partner with Lockheed Martin. The capital is definitely one of the areas that has to be substantiated, making sure that you have enough capital or cash on hand to be able to finish the project. At other times with our small business and our partnerships, especially during COVID-19, we've been able to in some occasions to be able to front the money to our small business so that they can complete the contract work that they have signed up for. Also understanding the various specifications and being able to have the right clearance level to work on a lot of our products require an entry level into our Lockheed Martin manufacturing. And that also may be a blocker where a lot of the employees that work, and it has to, not just a company, but it has to be a certain business rating, because we're governed by the government and providing our SIBRs. So if we submit a contract and we're saying we're going to execute this contract, and here are the companies that are supporting that, they have to have a certain credit rating, a certain establishment, and a certain level of clearance that has to be approved to for our government contract. And so I think that's one of the things, and also that's one of the things that we're working on when it comes to our diversity program. We do have a website, which I'll be more than happy to put in the chat for any that has small business that would like to follow the process of how we talk about what our engineering possibilities are, software development, any quality that we're focusing on, how we're going to actually traffic that manufacturing process through the life cycle of the project, and any kind of archives that we would use for historical data for pricing and labor that we pull in for our overall projects.
So the SIBRs program is so cool to me because this giant Lockheed Martin is actually sitting with small businesses and giving them feedback on where they stand, but also sort of guidance or a roadmap to how they can, become a subcontractor with Lockheed. And so getting a large government contract or getting a large contract with a corporation is a way to access large capital, just the funding that you get from doing business. But of course, we all know that you need money to make money, right? So maybe Andrew or Valerie, I would love for you to speak to what are the capital needs of early stage businesses, whether they're an established business or just someone who's a maker or a tinkerer, and how does that barrier prevent them from being prepared to take on some of these large contracts that Lee was speaking to?
And Phil, before you have Andrew and Valerie jump in, I just want to share the perspective from earlier when you were asking me the question about the capital piece as well before.
Sure. Yeah.
It leads me.
Yeah, go for it.
And what I wanted to say is that what we're seeing in this space of innovation is a business will approach us that wants to do a prototype, or they have a prototype and they need to build on that. And so what our responsibility is to make sure that they have the funds to create the prototype and that we find the correct resource partners in order to do that. And then after they have a solid product, there's the issue of product development and making sure that through the commercialization process that there's not a step skip before you actually have a customer base. Because you could have a product that's ready to go, and then you could want to put it in the big box store, and then you don't have any customers, but you've already formed a relationship with the manufacturer that's going to require that you come out the door with 4,000 units. So I think when you talk about the way the capital is utilized, it needs to be utilized properly. But as you build your customer base, you need to understand if you have an existing customer base in order to support the product. So I see that the role that we can play is making sure that you don't put the cart before the horse. And then the other piece is after you have that solid product, that you have adequate accommodations, that you have adequate space in order to deliver that product and produce that product, and that it meets the guidelines of the EPA or whatever, license and inspection, that is properly labeled, that it can maintain itself on a shelf. So bringing in those resource partners that can help you understand how to have elasticity with your product, how to have longevity with your product. And that comes by forming relationships with organizations in the Philadelphia area, such as DVIRC, who I see is on the call, Bernadine Halls, and also with organizations such as the Ben Franklin Technology Partners. We've also formed a partnership with Robin Hood Ventures, because the amount of money that is needed to operate in this space is exorbitant. And in order to do your due diligence and make sure you're fully capitalized, that's where I feel that we can add value.
So Pam, you hit the nail on the head. Regardless of who you are when you're coming into this industry, into this line of work, the barriers to entry, the cost to get going is exorbitant. There's policymakers who are interested in innovation and technology and innovative ecosystems. For the last 2 decades. No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to also say that there's a couple people who have just joined in on, who are perfect examples of it. Tiffany Kincaid. She is an entrepreneur on her way to having her own space and business. And when we answer the question, we have to answer the question with the respect of who we're serving. So at some point in the discussion, I'd love for you to have Tiffany Kincaid just share with you about her business that she hopes to garner support in this space from.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that Asali Carter, who was previously with GlaxoSmithKline, is on the call, and she also can speak to that critical need for connecting the entrepreneur with the corporate support, which also goes back to why it's critical to have resource partners such as EMSDC and other organizations that really, because we're talking about big dollars here, big dollars that can really make sure that these women and people of color get these opportunities once that readiness piece has been addressed.
So I would love to hear from either or both. Tiffany, if you're willing to tell us a little bit about your business, or Andrew, of course, just again about the product development process and how much time and capital is truly required. But before I jump to you guys, I just want to wrap up a point that I think you're pointing out, Pam, is that no matter who you are, no matter what your race, gender, etc. is, there's going to be these huge costs that Tiffany and Andrew can speak to. But like many things, this is exacerbated through racial and gender barriers as well. It's less than a fraction of a percent of all venture capital funding goes to women of color, for example, right? Or consider that 90% of any startup of any industry involves the personal assets of the entrepreneur who's starting that business, but Black families on average have negative assets. So there's a really important conversation to be had around the existing capital solutions to help entrepreneurs, but also designing them in a way that works for the specific needs of all the unique kinds of entrepreneurs that we have. But I'm going to zoom back out from that point and kick it over to Andrew and Tiffany as well, if you're willing to share. Yeah, what are the money struggles that makers face, and how does that affect the development process?
Sure. Yeah, I think to build a little bit on what Pam was saying, I think there's multiple stages in any successful business, right? And so I think there tends to be a sort of blind spot in that very early kind of product development phase. Either we kind of undervalue ourselves and we think our time isn't very valuable, or and so we'll spend hours and hours doing our own kind of work and tinkering. And so there's kind of a lack of capital there, because ultimately if you're not supported even in the early kind of product development and business conceptualization, those kind of early blocks can become then barriers to the next stage. And then any moment of scaling also requires another kind of influx of capital, whether that's investing in tooling related to a manufacturing need, whether that's scaling by growing your market access, whether that's scaling by bringing on new employees. Like that tipping point of needing to grow needs new capital. And as Phil mentioned, there's a tiny fraction of angel investment dollars that go into communities of color. And not only that, the money that does go into these communities tend to see a specific definition of return on investment, meaning like you have to get a quick turnaround, and it has to be a big turnaround. And so there's a lot of disconnect, right? So there are organizations like UMA across the country who are trying to have conversations around patient capital, and specifically patient capital tied to communities of color, and also in manufacturing. And also typically we see manufacturing is not always seen as this like exciting, like new innovative world. And so it's overlooked as not a growing sector. It's overlooked as it's not innovative. And yet it is both of those. And so there's a lot of kind of missed opportunity to bring capital both to the communities of color as well as manufacturing. And I think it's going to take, and maybe this is sort of wandering a bit from the topic, Phil, but it's definitely going to take a kind of reframing of ROI as something more than just making more money, but how could we talk about an investment in a business and in technology and in a sector as helping with social impact, or helping with health benefits, or just thinking beyond just the simple like, am I going to get $10 back for every dollar I put in? And I think that's extremely appropriate to think about the communities of color that also have been lacking investment in these other fields, like in healthcare and in other ways. And so how can we actually connect the dots between a career path in manufacturing, entrepreneurship in manufacturing, with increased benefits of stability in community economics and other things like that. And so I think hopefully, to also kind of bring it back to your first point, I think what we also see happening now is lots of innovation in the business modeling. So for example, if you're a triple bottom line business or a social impact business, or trying to build a business around circular economics, all those take innovation today. It's not just innovating on the product, it's innovation on the system to deliver your product. And there's a whole gap there. Like, people don't see the capitalization of that practice of designing the business model as something to invest in either. And so I think I think there's gaps everywhere and sort of blind spots everywhere, and it is a bit of it in of itself is a project that I think lots of people are trying to tackle at once. And I think there are interesting models that are playing out in other places that we could get into later. But ultimately, I think that the capital funding comes in at every stage of development, and it needs to be kind of rethought, like what is the impact of the capital beyond just getting money out of the system?
You made some really great points that I think I'm going to come back to take us into our next section. First, I just want to give Tiffany an opportunity, if you'd like to add some words just from your own experience as a small business, as an entrepreneur, and some of the costs that are involved in developing products, like developing products as opposed to software.
Okay. And before Tiffany gets started, I wanted to let you know that LaRonda Jackson is on the call from Chrysler Corporation. And we want to make sure that when we open it up for questions and comments, that she can give us a perspective from the car manufacturing side of things.
Thank you. What was the name?
LaRonda Jackson from the Chrysler Corporation.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Tiffany.
No worries. So just to speak on that, my interest is to start a biotech company that specializes in making different drug products that are going to be utilized in either early development or phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials. I'm in the sector of cell and gene therapy. So right now we are developing a business model, a business plan, and investor deck for trying to see who would be interested in investing in this type of CMO facility. So one of the struggles that I have is a lot to do with the seed money. It's not once the facility is built and you're in full operation. It's more getting to the point of the development of the business, the development of, choosing sites, needing engineers, needing quality support. That's one thing I'm really struggling with is trying to make the connections with the people in order to get the business really started with a solid foundation before it's even presented to investors.
So you're actually having to actually develop your product before we're even talking about getting your product to market. You have to actually build or have access to a physical facility, and then also you have to have access to a workforce, engineers, folks who can operate those facilities or help you operate those facilities.
Correct. So the process itself and the product itself is well on its way of development. It's just a thing of once you create a different business, you still have to make sure it's operational within that business, within that facility. So for me, it's more of all of the business aspect of running a biotech company, where my background is in science and the operation of it. So I know that full sector of it, but I'm not as familiar with all of the business aspects of it. So for me, I'm having a struggle with making the right connections with people who are knowledgeable about running a biotech company, about getting venture capital money, about doing, Series A, Series B, Series C funding, how to develop seed money. Those are the things that I'm struggling with.
And those are, in some sense, what you're describing are typical struggles of entrepreneurs. But I want to really belabor the point here that, again, so much of our focus over the last 2 decades has been on helping entrepreneurs in the software space develop apps by and large, right? But it really doesn't cost that much money. It mostly costs the time in an app that they're computed and write code and then iterate that code 1,000 times to improve the product, right? But if you're building a physical product, you have so many more costs because what you're doing is happening in the real world. And every time you develop that prototype, you're paying that cost of physical material in the process. And so I think that just goes back to a really interesting point that Andrew brought up, which is that if we, in order to have an economy that works for folks, in order to have a circular economy that's evaluated, distributed, and not being impacted, you really have to be innovative, not just in the actual design of these new products and services, but in the design of the systems, the people, the infrastructure that's needed for these things to exist. And so I think that's a really good segue into.
So Phil, it's Valerie, and I think this is critically important because for many the conversation is around startup, and as I said at the beginning, for EMSDC, the businesses that we look at are pretty much mature businesses or businesses that are in spaces that are in high demand. And so what has been discussed here is exactly what our corporate partners are looking for. And that is partnerships with businesses that have the technology, have the product, but need support and help in bringing it to market, or can do the R&D side of it, the research and development side, and then partner again with that corporation to bring it to market. A number of our business partners have these innovation centers as well, where they're looking to bring in more and more minority and women of color into these spaces to help them develop products and support them with the requisite subject matter experts that can address their issues around engineering, can address their issues around capitalization, can address their issues around government compliance. And the more that we know and we can bring them, that is our value add in the marketplace. And so I very much want to take this conversation further because the life science and biotech engineering is a space that we are very dominant in this marketplace, in this Philadelphia region.
Thank you, Valerie. And I think that's an excellent point to talk about the vision, the shared vision that the Business Center and EMSDC have in building the in manufacturing. The opportunity, rather, is that we have all of this innovation happening. There's going to be 46 million new manufacturing jobs in the next decade. But in order for all Philadelphians or for all people to be able to take advantage of these trends and not be left behind, there has to be an investment both within the social infrastructure to help folks like Tiffany find the investors that she needs, to find the engineers that she needs. But there also has to be an investment in physical infrastructure to help entrepreneurs have access to devices, machines that they need to prototype their products, but also to begin scaling production from small batches up until large ones. So with that, I'm going to transition into talking a little bit about the work that Andrew and I have been doing this summer to support the Business Center and EMSDC and devising a strategy around that. And so this is an ecosystem building approach to developing programs and resources in the advanced manufacturing space. And for the sake of time, since we're behind schedule, because I like to talk so much, I'm just gonna quickly address these first couple slides, and then hopefully we can get into some depth a couple slides in. So what is the ecosystem building process? What does it look like? And how are the proposed programs and initiatives that EMSDC and the Business Center are working on help to cultivate this ecosystem in a way that's inclusive of all Philadelphians. So the word ecosystem is, I think this is being used in a mainstream context these days, but basically this is the biological definition that has been adapted and expanded upon in the economic development space to define an ecosystem as a community of living networks and organizations in conjunction with their physical environment, so that the place where they're all located, interacting through a culture of support and collaboration. So it's not enough to have, when you're thinking about an ecosystem, it's not enough to just have a presence of all of these different amazing resources like a city like Philadelphia has. We have world-class universities. We've got relatively good workforce development programs. There's thousands of small and medium-sized manufacturers in the tri-state region of Philadelphia. And so Philly has these really great bones to have a world-leading ecosystem for advanced manufacturing, sort of harkening back to, you know, when Philadelphia was the workshop to the world, right? We can sort of get back to that in the 21st century. But it's not just the existence of all these assets, but it's how they're connected. Do these folks work in silos? Do they openly share resources and talent? These are all things that folks are trying to figure out how to do to have a more robust and inclusive ecosystem. So here's just a graphic. This is borrowed from the Brookings Institution's concept of an ecosystem. But again, it's these existing economic, networking, and physical assets in a space, but all built, connected together through a culture of support. A culture of support and collaboration. So the process of actually building an ecosystem sort of has these 5 steps. The first is you take stock of all the existing assets in your ecosystem. You work to build relationships and partnerships, bring down silos, try to understand what are the common missions between organizations and initiatives. Through that, you can start to build trust and increased sharing of resources and talent, and create a shared value and vision for the entire region. And once you have an ecosystem that's sort of humming and working together, you can begin to identify and invest in gaps in that ecosystem and make it stronger. So there's 8 different initiatives or programs that we are proposing are involved in this vision for an innovation and manufacturing center. But the impetus for how these programs will be designed and implemented are all around helping the Business Center and EMSDC walk through this process and actually activate this process of mapping the ecosystem, making connections. And so as we describe these sort of 8 different strategies, you'll see that we've organized them in levels of stages. What do these initiatives look like, in their first couple of months? What's the sort of, low cost, quick way to implement some of these things? And as they grow over time, and as the ecosystem is being developed, what do they look like when they're stable or when they're becoming more generative? So these are the 8 strategies that we're gonna quickly touch on today. Curated events, business education workshops, business model development, connecting to academia or to universities, the existence of structured mentorship programs, access to capital, which we talked about is so important, as well as access to small prototyping and small batch services, as well as programs for youth skill development. So curated events, the purpose of curated events, by and large, is to convene ecosystem partners, celebrate ecosystem partners, and sort of shine a spotlight on folks who are already doing really cool stuff in Philadelphia. And the Business Center and EMSDC through this project are well positioned already through their networks to host events just to get different folks from different stakeholder groups in the room, talking with one another, learning from one another, but also talking about Philadelphia and how to benefit Philadelphia. And so things in the early stages can be as simple as a maker meetup, a networking event. But these can also evolve into online courses, business plan competitions, or even regional or national symposiums where we're really highlighting Philadelphia as a center for inclusive economic development within Industry 4.0. Business education workshops. A lot of this work would dovetail with curated events, but the focus here would be less on networking, although that might happen, but more so on actually developing the skills related to business specifically that so many entrepreneurs benefit from brushing up on. Business model development. And I should point out, and Andrew included a really nice graphic at the end of these slides that shows how all these initiatives sort of connect and leverage one another. But getting assistance through folks who are attending these curated events or through labs from universities or academic institutions that are participating, or just finding support through mentors or other technical assistance providers. These are all examples of how to support a small business through the business development process. Helping them identify in quick and cheap ways whether or not their product even has a market fit. How do you help a business validate their business model without spending a whole ton of money? So this looks like accelerator programs, incubator programs, and this could ultimately evolve into something that's connected with a local anchor procurement initiative, where large institutions in the region can direct the type of businesses, the kinds of businesses that are being developed to fit one of their existing needs. And then finally, before I hand it over to Andrew, structured mentorship programs. So again, those curated events, just getting people in the room and hearing the stories of existing entrepreneurs in the marketplace is one way of one form of really light mentorship, learning from examples, learning from people who look like you or who are just a couple of years ahead of you in the process. But this can go all the way up to really highly programmed, high touch based mentorship programs where we're really counting on the development of a relationship between different actors in an ecosystem. And by the way, we'll be sharing more of this information later. So I apologize that I'm flashing so quickly through these. Andrew, you want to jump into the next one here?
Yep. So another opportunity that we see to help build the ecosystem and build bridges is to connect to academia. And so that's starting out with something relatively easy, like inviting both students as well as faculty to present kind of where their research exists. And we also, as we kind of move up the ladder in complexity, we also want to help those either recent graduates or faculty find pathways to commercialization. So how could they turn their academic work into entrepreneurship? And then the top level, where we see actually kind of having a facility with advanced manufacturing technology, we would love to see students and faculty working alongside entrepreneurs in both doing research, but also doing actual product development for specific targeted markets. Next slide. Also bringing it back to capital, another kind of series of strategies that we have starts out with relatively simple things like understanding capital and financing. So introducing to entrepreneurs the different models, whether that's going after angel investors, whether that's utilizing some sort of crowdsourcing, whether that's learning about using credit, et cetera, just kind of understanding there's multiple types of capital access out there. Moving up to an access to capital network, which is making it more visible. As Phil pointed out earlier, it's one thing to have a lot of resources available. It's another to make them accessible. And so how do we build that kind of more accessible network all the way up to then like an angel conference, which is actually using a model that we see used by a small business development center out in California, which is rather than trying to bring in the kind of angel investor to put millions of dollars on the table, it's actually a community-centric thing where you actually teach people to become investors, and you pool, say, 20 different investors, each offering $5,000 to create a pool of money. So it's engaging both sides of the investor conversation, entrepreneurs as well as individuals. Next slide. We also see an immediate need for helping bridge the gap between manufacturing technology needs and access to entrepreneurs as well. So we think it's important to, again, start easy and quick, where we're just building conversations between entrepreneurs, established companies, and larger scale manufacturing. And then getting to work helping design for manufacturing. So how do we help companies scale from maybe something they've done by themselves at home or done on a 3D printer, and help them learn how to make it more appropriate for larger scale production. And then moving up, building more relationships, building more access to technology. And then ultimately, again, trying to offer services through an established facility that, again, makes AMT available to more entrepreneurs. And then our last strategy, which is focused on building bridges between the next generation and the future of manufacturing. So this is helping both not just prepare entrepreneurs, but also how to prepare people for careers in manufacturing, and whether that's learning how to operate advanced manufacturing technology, whether that's helping innovate advanced manufacturing technology, or also find opportunities to be an entrepreneur, kind of bridge both worlds. And so this we see starting with creating more a makerspace or Fab Lab that's accessible to more people, to opening up doors to existing places of learning and doing. And then finally, again, on down the road where we have our own facility, being able to employ individuals to both produce products using small batch technologies, as well as helping entrepreneurs through research and development phases. Last slide. And so I realize this is a bit of an eye exam style image. And so it's less important to be able to kind of read everything detailed. What we're trying to represent here instead is illustrating that we're very strategically thinking about how do we roll out some of these strategies and offerings in parallel to help, again, build bridges between startups, between established businesses, corporations, manufacturers, et cetera, with the awareness and the sort of eye to the future, so that we're building more and more complexity, more and more strategic resources. And eventually, like, the ultimate goal is to build a new type of physical hub where all these different players are able to interact, support one another, collaborate, and ultimately kind of build new innovation that, again, is supporting multiple communities, but especially women and people of color. So I will hand it back to Phil.
So yeah, I really love that last image. Again, taking an ecosystem or a systems approach to tackling it is really what is required to tackle a problem that is as complex as the one that we're discussing here, because there's so many different pieces available. But as Andrew pointed out, each of these pathways seem like a lot of work, individually, but can be stitched together efficiently, and both in a way, again, to connect and create both a social infrastructure and a physical infrastructure required to advance technologies in an inclusive way in the region. And before we open it up to questions and answers, I have a sort of an inspiring thought based on a comment that Valerie, that you shared a couple days ago, and feel free to expound if I'm not as articulate as you here. But Valerie pointed out that this, within oppressed peoples, within Black folks specifically, but within all sorts of marginalized groups, there is a long legacy of innovation and problem solving, making physical things, craftsmanship. And because, as Andrew pointed out, I think partly because the manufacturing industry has sort of lost its allure, or it's not the sexy thing anymore. There's a lack of pride, I think, across all groups in their ability to contribute to society using these types of skills, but especially within marginalized groups, within women and people of color. And I think it's true about the space of innovation in general. Like, what are our narratives of who are the problem solvers, who are the innovators, who are the cutting edge folks in society? And the more that we're able to see all people as being able to contribute to some of these complex and intractable issues that we're facing, I think the better off we'll be. So there's a business case to be made. There's a moral argument to be made about why we have to sort of unlock the potential of all people. But to me, that is what's at the heart of this work, of this project, and that's what's most exciting to me, at least. So I don't know if anyone wants to build on that thought, or let it be if you want. But we do have a few minutes left in our time here. I know some of y'all have a hard stop.
Phil, we do have 2 questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them, or can you read them?
Can you go for it, Pam, since you have
Sure.
it open?
Okay, so the first question is from Lee Huang, and he asks, can you talk about the role of capital access to ensuring equitable participation in Industry 4.0?
So we got to that question in the beginning segment.
So Lee, you can respond and just let us know that it addressed your question specifically around that. And the second question is from Angie Sample. I am a new startup company. The name of her business, if I'm pronouncing this right, is J-Om Jeanwear, with purpose for women of color. For me, who is doing the bulk of business from home, can someone advise me on steps I need to take to further and realize at some point I realize at some point I will need more businesses to grow, or more business growth by manufacturing. So she's just asking about the steps that she should be taking with her jean wear product. So she's making a clothing product.
So I would say, with 5 minutes to go, I don't know that it's possible for us to answer that question and do it justice.
She can certainly reach out to us, Angie. If you put your email and your phone number, we can follow up with you and get more into the steps. Like Phil said, with the limited amount of time, we don't have enough time to take you through all of the steps. But
and those steps are going to be unique to your business.
If you put your phone number and your email, we can get back to you. I think we do have your email, actually. Okay. And then maybe we can get some comments. We have a number of partners I see in the audience. Bernadine, would you like to make some comments? Yeah, we can. Okay.
just 1 or 2 comments. And to the woman who has the biopharmaceutical company, there is a major USA manufacturing institute called NIMBLE that's devoted to the biopharmaceutical company. And I would say get in touch with that USA Manufacturing Institute. And I would also say one of the things we did not touch on, and Layla, this is particular to a large firm like Lockheed Martin, and that is if you want to play in Industry 4.0 or Manufacturing 4.0, it's almost critical that you understand the DFARS regulations and cybersecurity. And I tell any company that if you don't understand cybersecurity and are doing things to make sure your product or your process is in keeping with DFARS, which is the regulations for cybersecurity, you're not going to be anchored in any fashion. So that's going to be a barrier when if you're DFARS compliant, it's an anchor.
Thank you, Bernadine. And then to answer James, your question, yes, this is being recorded, so I believe we will be able to share this out afterwards.
Yes, we are recording. The whole session has been recorded. And we also want to apologize for any difficulty that some people had getting into this session. Sometimes Google has its own challenges beyond our control, and that's what we experienced today. So we decided to record it and make sure that anyone who was not able to get in will get a copy of the information and be able to listen to it at their leisure.
So I'm gonna just close out here with informations on next steps. So as I mentioned, those strategies that Andrew and I sort of just sped through ago, we're actually writing an entire report that goes into depth about these strategies and the different roles that folks in the ecosystem can play to help support this movement, this coalition of folks that the Business Center and EMSDC are working together to build. And so here's our contact information if you'd like to learn more about this work and get involved. And with that, unless there's anyone has a burning word to share in our last 30 seconds.
Well, I just wanted to thank Phil, Andrew, and Layla, and Valerie, and all of you for being a part of this session. We really look forward to having the opportunity to further this discussion, to act on critical pieces for next steps, to make some of the things we talked about reality, and especially with some creative ways of financing. We're really taking a deep look at that. And we definitely look forward to all of the resource partners, as well as our subject matter experts. So we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the future. Valerie?
And I want to just echo Pam's thanks. This is a very important project. We recognize that in the times that we're in now more than ever, it is critical that we create space for minorities and women to be included in the innovation economy. And the partnerships that we have, not only with the entrepreneurs, but with the supply chain, with the educational institutions, and with our resource partners, are going to be critical in advancing the growth and capacity of these businesses in this space. And so I just want to thank everyone for their time. And we look forward to continuing our partnership on tapping these subject matter experts that are out here in the marketplace and delivering a high level, high quality product out to our entrepreneurs. Thank you very much. Thank you, Phil and Andrew and Pam.
And Leela as well, thank you.
And Leela, yes, I'm sorry, and Leela as well.
And all the folks who spent 90 minutes with us today. So thank you for your time, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you.